Hello, my friends out there in the universe of power. Welcome to Titan Talk. It has been a little bit since I was last on the air. There have been some pretty intense happenings going on in my life as of late. Ever since I got back from the Shaw Classic, things have been moving seemingly at 100 miles an hour. And I've owned my gym Alpha Fit for, let's see, I think we're going on maybe 7, going on 8 years now. I took it over from some really great people back in 2015. And it has just come to that time to where I am closing the pages on Alpha Fit and locking it away in the history books. I'm closing down my gym. It's been something that I've been wanting to do, honestly, for a while. It never was truly my vision. And although I found a lot of priceless memories, that we created along the way, and it definitely was an era in a lot of ways, it also was one of the most powerful negative forces in my life in terms of stress. And this year especially, I had so many opportunities before me. And I really feel like I was unable to take full advantage of those opportunities due to a lot of the stress that I had surrounding Alpha Fit. So it's been something I've been wanting to do for a while now. And we had a change of ownership of the entire property on which my gym and a couple other gyms lease warehouses from. And really great guy. I got to meet and talk to him. But with so many people, so many tenants leasing space there was a bit of miscommunication. And when I got back from the Shaw, he had expected me and all the other tenants to be out by the end of August, which was like, I just got back and now I have to pack up and close my gym. So talking to him and arranging some things, it was able to be extended, but come October 1st, I am out. Alpha Fit is locked away in the pages of history, and I am moving on to the next exciting chapter of my life. But that being said, packing down and closing down a gym and thinking about what comes next for me in terms of my training has been a bit of an undertaking, and that is just for me. I mean, I have quite a few athletes under my wing that I've had to figure out where they're going to relocate to and train. But as for my end, I'm going to wind up setting up a nice home gym training area and a good section of land in my backyard. I'm very fortunate that the house that I live in is in a historic part of town where the yards were quite bigger back in the day, back in the 1950s when it was built. So got a lot of yard to work with. That being said, I've had to demolish a shed. I've had to level out some ground. I'm going to have to wind up doing a concrete foundation and all sorts of other stuff, but I will have a nice home gym area to where I just have to walk outside and train. But it's going to be a landscaping project, a construction project, and a moving project with clearing out my other gym. So I'm recording this episode halfway through the week. I've got 3 or 4 more days of intense manual labor ahead of me. I have not trained very regularly. I mean, if you're following me on Instagram, you've noticed that I have not put that many training videos out lately. And honestly, I've been getting 2, maybe 3 training sessions in a week, but usually it's been about 2 training sessions in every week. So I'm more just maintaining right now. And I know I'm getting a lot of manual labor work, clearing out trees, demolishing stuff and moving equipment. But training has kind of been put on pause because even if I were to go train, I cannot help but think of this mountain of work that I have ahead of me. And it's a bit daunting at times, but like any other mountain I've faced in my life, I take it one step at a time and we just keep on plugging away and thinking about all the beautiful things that come next ahead in the future. So I am excited. There's a lot of work ahead, but as I had mentioned, Alpha Fit was an amazing era in so many ways. I got to meet so many amazing people, see my training and coaching philosophies start to take shape in many gifted individuals who are still using that kindled flame to this day to follow their own pursuits. So in all the positivity, that priceless positivity that I'll carry for the rest of my life and invaluable life experience as well in managing a business, it was also an extreme weight on my mind. I was in a lot of dark places. And if I'm being completely honest, once COVID hit and there were the initial pandemic lockdowns, it was really, I was kind of holding on to something that wasn't really there anymore. A lot of the group training dynamics kind of fizzled out and the gym never really caught back up to be able to support itself the way that it did. So I was winding up having to really strain my own pockets outside of AlphaFit to keep it afloat. And I was fine doing that. You know, it was my training environment and the training environment for a lot of my athletes too. But at a certain point over these past 2 years, things had just gotten so tough that, you know, it weighed on me in many more ways than once. And even on the precipice of moving out and surrounded by all this effort that goes into uprooting and closing down a previous location, now I get to focus so much more on myself, and I'm so excited. And I've already felt so much relief in the efforts that I've put in, and knowing that I don't have this mountain of stress ahead of me anymore, other than just creating something new that's just for me. So that's been consuming my time lately, and I apologize for not being as active on social media as I had been in the previous weeks. But understand this, for those of you who it means so much to have your following and your support, that ever since I got back from the Shaw Classic, it has been trying to figure out what comes next in terms of where is my gym going and what's going to become of it, how am I going to train, and how does life keep moving forward. But great things are on the horizon, and I am always ready to put in the work for paving the road that lies ahead. But this is a solo episode of Titan Talk. I had been promising this one for a while, and I wanted to get this one out a couple weeks ago, if I'm being completely honest, but life has a way of making things get delayed, and I really enjoyed getting to record my last episode of Titan Talk with Don Souza of ADL Live. If you didn't get a chance to listen to it, I know it's a very long episode. I think we went well over 2 hours, closing in on close to 3 hours. So it's a long listen, but we touched on some really great topics. You know, ADL has been on the forefront of live streaming in these last 2 years and bringing the experience to so many people who would not have had that experience otherwise. And it's contributing massively to the growth of strongman and exposure for strongman here in the States. And that's quite exciting. So Don and we've had often intersecting paths, our last of which was at the Shaw Classic, and what a monumental day that was. So there were some really good topics covered, and I did wind up making sure that there were some chapters, you know, so those of you that are listening in pieces or following along in pieces can kind of see that and, you know, direct yourself through that long episode. But check it out. It's the last episode I published. I also put it up on YouTube, and I did chop it into 5 parts. That was really fun. But now it's time for just me and the microphone, no one else, and you as the listeners. So this solo episode is going to be comprised a lot of questions from the fans. I did put out a story post and some stuff on Instagram to kind of get a feel for what you guys wanted to hear and what you wanted to listen to. So a lot of questions from you all are going to comprise the bulk of this episode. Let's dive right in. I got a lot of questions on the topic of recent contests. And one of those questions comes from @shits&gigs on Instagram. Shits and Gigs asks, what happened at the World Deadlift Championships? When will redemption be? So for the World Deadlift Championships in Cardiff, I was also training for the Shaw Classic at the same time. And these are 2 big contests, you know, the World Deadlift Championships and the Giants Live Open. I mean, I was training to make an attempt at the deadlift world record. So very high stakes training, and with high stakes training comes high potential for consequence. And even more so, we had an event at the Shaw, the car leg press, which leg press, for some of us, we have access to a leg press in our gyms. Others, like myself, hadn't done a leg press. I hadn't done a leg press in about 6 or 7 years. So there was a bit of a, not a learning curve. You don't forget how to leg press, but there was an adaptation curve. You know, the body isn't necessarily so conditioned to that range of motion, or being under that level of stress. For me, I got to do one session. It went great. I went a week later to do another leg press session, trying to build off the numbers from that previous session. And at a weight that I was pretty sure was going to be no problem for me, I wound up popping and partially tearing one of my hip adductors, and one of the muscles that pulls the femur in closer to the body. And it sucked. Like, it really, in that moment, I knew I was going to miss out on so much power on a lot of my leg driven motions. And immediately I'm thinking of, wow, there just goes my deadlifting ability right there. Like, there's no way I can hit a world record deadlift right now let alone any of the other leg stuff to follow. But in that moment of injury, we're always our own worst enemy, and it's so quick to think that everything's all over. Whereas in reality, what happened has already happened. It is your best chance to take acceptance of that and now figure out strategies to make the way forward as effective and concise as possible so that you're not dealing with that injury for a long amount of time. So as the days went on, I realized it wasn't quite as bad as I thought, and I could still deadlift to a degree. I could still move around well. Leg pressing was something that for all the way up until the Shaw Classic, it was not going to feel what it used to, because I popped a muscle. I mean, a muscle partially tore, and that was one of those hip muscles that really keeps the upper leg right where it needs to be throughout the whole course of the motion. So when you lose that, it's like there's a big power player right there. So anyways, I wound up popping that leg muscle 2 weeks prior to the Giants Live World Open in Cardiff and the World Dove Championships. And a couple days before that, I had popped my right bicep, the bicep that I have never torn before. I felt a very small pop near the top, but a pop nonetheless, while I was doing an Atlas Stone run training for the Giants Live Castle Stones. And it was, for anyone who's torn a bicep before or torn a muscle, you know when it happens. You know when it happens. You feel it. It feels different than just a joint pop. For me, my body also gives me this like early warning system where my vision tunnels out and it starts, my hearing gets muffled like I'm underwater. And that early warning system comes in very useful for me because I've noticed it every single time I've done something serious to my body. And sure enough, it happened on both the stone bicep pop and then the leg press injury a couple days later. So I knew I had, a crappy bicep injury and then a crappy hip injury too. Luckily, the bicep injury was just a real small partial. It might even have just been the fascia binding the bicep, but I do have a little bit of a deformed bicep now, but I don't think you can see it on the camera as I'm recording, but there's a little lump right there in the bicep. But it didn't affect me at the Shaw. However, with these injuries happening only 2 weeks prior to the Giants Live World Open, I knew that I'm not going to travel all the way across the world and half-ass it, especially with deadlift being the first event. I knew if I could still deadlift, I could still get in my suit, I could still pull over 900 pounds, I was going to try and give it my all. But my body was giving me every single indication that if I did try and push it, something bad was going to happen. It was going to be worse than what happened the first time, and I'm going to be stuck on the other side of the world. I'm going to be injured, possibly having to get surgery, and then I'm going to come back to the U.S., and I'm not going to be able to get out and compete at the Shaw. So it was one of those things where I had to make a really tough call and pull out of the Giants Live show at the start of that week leading into the show. It was, do I pull out of one for the sake of having that one more week of recovery between Giants Live and the Shaw Classic? Or do I go to Wales, hurt myself, and completely bomb out and just wind up jacking up my chances for having fun at the Shaw and anything else that comes next? Really tough call. But looking back on the tough calls I had to make with pulling out, I wouldn't change a thing. The one thing is I hope that Giants Live doesn't hold my decision against me. And I say this, because this is show business in a lot of ways for them. I mean, they're filling stadiums up. It's a short roster of athletes. I mean, the roster for these shows is there with guys who are trying to earn their ticket to World's Strongest Man. You podium at a Giants Live show, you got your World's Strongest Man invite. But with my record behind me, I've only done 2 Giants Live shows, both of which I was injured for. So the reflection of my ability at those 2 shows wasn't really what I know I'm capable of. And then having to pull out of a Giants Live show the week of, I really hope that they don't take that and be like, oh, well, that's the last time we're inviting Gabe. I don't get that vibe from them. They're all great people. I just know that, when you do have to pass or pull out of an opportunity, it does kind of make it harder on their end to want to give it back to you. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being too in my head about it. I want to go back to Giants Live. That's the thing. I don't know if my body would necessarily be ready to go back to Giants Live as early as Glasgow in 2 weeks. I haven't been training, and I'm still rehabbing some of the injuries that kind of resurfaced a little bit at the Shock Classic. But I feel really good right now. I'm just not at peak strength. Not to mention I don't like those events at Glasgow, but I have been seeing a lot of guys pulling out of that show for whatever reason, and I hope I don't get the call in a lot of ways, because I'm not in my best form to compete, and I would feel inclined to say yes to something that I don't think I should say yes to, just because I don't want to lose my spot at Giants Live. But a lot of that's in my head. I mean, the Giants Live crew, they've made it very clear that I'm already part of the family. It does feel like family, but again, this is show business in a lot of ways, and I've had this feeling ever since I became a pro that when you get opportunity knocking on your door, if you say no to it or if you have to pass it up, that's it. They're on to the next one, and it's really hard for them to find their way back to you. So I'm optimistic, and the important thing is that my body is feeling good. A lot of my injuries are starting to really feel behind me. I'm able to run, which is something that I wasn't able to do throughout the course of my knee injuries. But to get back to the original question, when will redemption be for having to pull out the World Deadlift Championships? The simplest answer is it will be at the next big opportunity, whether it's the World Deadlift Championships in 2023 or sooner. I mean, one of my biggest goals in life is to pull a world record deadlift. So anytime there's an opportunity to contest my strength against the best deadlifters in the world and really try my ability through a good prep and a big stage, that's what I want. I had a follow-up question that kind of ties along to this, asked by Ryan Cooling 1 on Instagram. Are we going to see you at the Rogue Invitational? There's better guys on paper for now, to be honest. I know what I'm capable of, and what I'm capable of is much more that's reflected on my own resume, if you will, or merit sheet of what I've achieved so far in this sport. Even thinking back to World's Strongest Man this year, my group, the death group, dubbed by some, I outperformed a lot of really strong guys on several events, but at the end of the day, I still wound up tying for fifth. And tying for fifth in my heat with Constantine, he did beat me out on that last event, which breaks that tie. So on paper, I got sixth out of my qualifying round at World's Strongest Man. And even though it was one of my best performances, I completed the whole show, it was it sucks that knowing on paper, when they put that little card at the bottom of the screen, or they ask you, what was your best achievement or so far at World's Strongest Man? Well, I was sixth in my group. I mean, that's dead last in my qualifying group. It sucks. It's a stupid record. Like, it doesn't really show the amount of achievement I had on some of those events at this year's. But that's just one example. So there's better guys on paper for now. They're all my friends. I mean, they're great guys who have all deserved to be there. And it really hurts to know that Evan just tore his bicep, and he's going to have to miss out on that. He announced that he's not doing any more competitions between now and World's Strongest Man 2023, which sucks in many ways. But he's a dear friend of mine, a brother in so many ways, and I love him to death. And he's had a really tough year and a good strand of bad luck. And I think he just really needs to lock it down and focus on training for the big one, and that's World's Strongest Man. So I'm glad to know he's going to do that. But as for the Rogue Invitational this year, Ryan, I really want in on the record breakers. I can't find much information on how to get in. If there's going to be a deadlift, whether it's going to be on the elephant bar or whatever it's going to be, they need to have me there. Like, I'll come pull a big ass deadlift. I don't need an invite to the whole show. I know I haven't proven myself to earn that yet. I mean, I would accept gladly, but there's, like I said, there's better guys on paper. But if there's a deadlift at the Rogue Invitational record breakers, I want in. Let the record show. So moving on to the Shaw Classic, asked by @DoubleDexter54 on Instagram, what are some stories from the recent Shaw Classic that you'd like to share? There's quite a few. I just talked about how Evan has been having a strand of bad luck this year, and even at the Shaw Classic this year, he did have a bit of bad luck, and wasn't able to perform on many of the events the way that we all knew that he could, especially himself. But even in the midst of all of that bad luck, he still found to create some time to create a really good memory for myself. And when we were backstage at the locker room, Evan, it was myself, my wife Bianca, my daughter Xiomara, and then Evan was backstage, and he reaches into his suitcase and he pulls out this stuffed T-Rex, and he gives it to my daughter Zio. And I just have these pictures of big old T-Rex tough guy Evan holding my little infant daughter who was 5 months old at the time, and he's showing her new toy, and she's just jazzed and fired up, making baby face at her. And it was just a really good memory of two people that I love, my daughter, the world in my arms, and then my brother in strength, just Mr. T-Rex. So that was a really good memory of Evan gifting my daughter her first T-Rex doll. Big old softy, that guy. Getting into the Atlas Stones as we were preparing for the final event of the day. If you watch on my YouTube channel, I just posted a behind-the-scenes look at day 2 of the Shaw Classic, and it kind of shows some of my mind frame going into a lot of these events and how I was dealing with having to pull out of the car leg press or really make some conscientious and smart decisions to bide my energy for that stone run. But getting ready for the stones, there was a moment where it was Texas boys helping Texas boys. It was myself and Trey Mitchell. We were getting ready, our tacky, our sleeves on for the stone runs, and then Nick Guardione and Austin Andrade, two of our good friends. They train at Heavy Metal Fitness in San Antonio. Austin Andrade just recently became a pro here in America at Beerstone, a competition I hosted earlier this year. He earned his pro card there. And then Nick Guardione is just right on the verge of getting his pro card. He has the strength for it. It's just like when I was going for my pro card, he's always getting these narrow factors that it eludes his grasp. But I have no doubt Nick is right there, and he's going to get his pro card soon. But Austin was there competing at the Shaw Classic in the Opens, not in the pros, or not with us. He was competing earlier on in the day, so he was done with his contest. He had just done stones earlier. But now it's time to get me and Trey ready. And there was Nick and Austin helping us get our tacky on. Whatever we needed, they were there. And it just felt like in the midst of all the other noise going on, I don't know, it felt like a very intimate brotherly thing. Like they were motivating, saying things that we needed to hype me up. I mean, Nick is such a great hype man. He's always dropping these one-liners like, "Now's the time, Gabe. You leave nothing behind." Little stuff like that. There's just like adding fuel to the fire. And it just felt special. It felt really special to have that support from two other guys who weren't competing in that moment, along with my brother Trey, who was right on the verge of defending his title. And to have us all getting ready for me to go out and give my absolute best stone performance that I've ever given on stones that weight. I mean, it was just really awesome. And I will forever remember that moment of support from my Texan brothers. I have two other memories from the weekend that I want to share. Brian Shaw and Carrie Shaw loved to take, Brian Shaw and Carrie Shaw loved to take all of the athletes ATVing after the Shaw Classic. After the final day, we all travel up to Estes Park and we get in some ATVs and go just cruising, driving on rocky slopes in the mountains, just having an absolute blast. Last year, Trey had jumped in the ATV with his father, and I was in another ATV with my wife Bianca. And my wife Bianca was pregnant at the time, so that kind of kept us from going a little crazy on the ATV. I didn't want to shake her around too much while the baby was inside her. And then, of course, Trey was in the ATV with his dad, and from my understanding, his dad drove the whole time. And I can speak from experience from being right behind them that Mr. Mitchell was out for a Sunday cruise on that day because it was not the most high-speed stuff. But I say this because this year, my wife wasn't with me while we were ATVing. She was taking care of my daughter, and Trey's parents weren't able to make this show. So I was like, Trey, let's get in the ATV together. And, man, we both just let loose. We were taking turns every time we would stop, and just like Trey has this laugh. It's a very high-pitched laugh when he's having a truly a ball of a time, and I'm sure I do too. And it was just really fun getting to let loose with Trey, especially after he had just defended his title for a second year in a row, and all the labors of the contest, getting to head out and tackle some rocky slopes and hit some high-speed octane fueled motorsports. It was fun. It was really fun doing ATVing with Trey. And then the day before the Shaw Classic, or I think the day of the arrival, yeah, so it was Thursday. As soon as we got there to Loveland, I wanted to do some acclimation. You know, I'm from sea level. I needed to get my lungs feeling altitude a little bit. So I wanted to go up to Estes Park, to Rocky Mountain National Park, and hike around. And got my wife Bianca ready and my daughter Zio, and we actually bumped into Luke and Cushy Stoltman in the lobby and of the hotel, and we invited them if they wanted to come with us, and they did. They jumped on it, and that was really cool. I mean, they get to see a whole new part of the world that they hadn't been to before, and we took them up to Rocky Mountain National Park. We went out to a trail that I had never been on before, and we just started hiking and kind of getting lost in the wilderness, in the forest, and it was just a really good outing, and got to hang out with Luke and Cushy and just have my daughter with us in her hiking backpack. It was a really good time. And at one point, we had gotten to the highest point of which we were going to hike at before heading back. And in the valley, like right next to us, we heard just this crazy commotion and could feel the earth moving. And then I started to see this dust rise up, and we heard a rock slide, a rock fall, pretty close in the distance. And I had never heard a rock slide like that. I never felt a rock slide like that. We were unaffected. I mean, it was far away from us, but to feel the earth moving and to hear the reverberations of that crashing against, rocks against each other, it was a powerful force. And I am so glad that we were not anywhere near that, but it was pretty cool. And getting to go out there in nature and hang out with Luke and Cushy before the contest, that was another really fond memory. And I believe Luke put some of that footage on his YouTube channel, so you might want to go check it out. But those were some fond memories of the Shaw. And another question about the Shaw Classic asked by @Tychius72. What happened during the yoke run at the Shaw Classic? Awesome stone run, by the way. Thank you, Tychius. The yoke. So last year at the Shaw, we had just about the same weight yoke, 1,100 pounds. It was 1,117 this year. And last year I tried as best I could, and I was so fresh off of my knee injuries that I couldn't even pick it up. I think I passed out under it almost, but it was a very stubborn yoke. And yoke is something I used to be so good at. I loved it. I loved being one of the best yoke runners in the country. But after injuring my knees, it has been something very tough to get back to. So I had a big goal this year of moving the yoke, and just I wanted to finish it. I wanted to give it my all and have it beat last year. So I got under that yoke, and as soon as I started moving with it, I just felt like my legs are going to shut down under me. So I went as far as I could, and I didn't pass out like conscious-wise, but my legs just gave up. They gave up. They started shaking, and I knew I was going down, so I just my legs went out from under me. I'm like, all right, here we go. And I fell down to the ground. I stayed down on the ground as long as it took while my legs were shaking, trying to regain control. People were already rushing me. Medical staff or anyone there was ready to help me out and get up. And as soon as my legs came back, I got back up, got into that yoke, and picked it up again. And that second time I picked it up, it went even better. And I just plugged away, and I almost cleared that whole distance until I felt my legs start shaking again, and then they just cut out from under me, and boom, I'm going down again. So my legs had just given up under me. They completely shut down, and that caused me to fall down to the ground. So I think it's purely because my legs have not been conditioned to running with that type of weight for quite some time now. And I was very stubborn and determined to get it done, and I did as much as I could. I'm very proud of it. But with knowing how that happened, a lot of my focus and training from here on out is going to be on really improving my yoke runs. And especially, wow, did y'all see Mitchell Hooper at the Arnold UK? Oh my gosh. Talk about yoke motivation right there. Like, I want to get back to my prime yoke condition so I can give this guy a run for his money, because he is looking absolutely untouchable on yoke right now. But that's as inspiring as it can be. So nothing serious happened on yoke at the Shaw. I didn't get hurt. It was just my legs completely shut down on me twice. But, I had a goal of doing as much as I could on that yoke. So I got up and I just kept using every bit of time that I could. So we are at the tail end of September. September is Hispanic Heritage Month, and I am a Hispanic person. You know, my dad's side of the family is Mexican Hispanic, and my mom's side of the family is Czech. My dad's side of the family, I live in the Rio Grande Valley, a part of Texas, right along the border. Culture here is Mexican culture. I take a lot of pride in my culture, in my Hispanic roots. So much pride that when I go compete internationally at World's Strongest Man, at Giants Live, I carry the Mexican flag. There had never really been a Mexican strongman, and I know I'm not a Mexican native. I never claimed to be, but I am a Hispanic, and I have Mexican heritage, and I'm very proud of that heritage. And I know from living here in the Rio Grande Valley that there is so much strength in our culture, so much physical strength that needs representation, and it craves it. So I take a lot of pride in representing my roots, and that's something I'm very in touch with, especially this time of year, Hispanic Heritage Month, because these heritage months, it's just a label on a month, right? But at the same time, this label is there so that the individuals or anyone can kind of just take that moment of pause and reflect and understand, like, the story of every person's unique heritage is a story filled with so many life experiences and tales of wanting to have a better life, of paving for the future, of planning for families and generations ahead. I mean, stories of adventure, of travel, of hardship, stories that deserve some reflecting on. So, it's it's a label, whatever. You should be happy and proud of your heritage every month of the year, but call some attention to one month so that at least we can take some pause and not forget or overlook the things that really matter, like those stories. But on the topic of Hispanic heritage, this was a question asked to me by Jaime868 on Instagram. He says, how does it feel knowing that you're the forefront of Latin American strongman representation? How does it feel that other Latin American athletes look to you and say, "Si se puede"? That second question, that hits me all the way down to my heart. To represent my heritage at the international shows, at World's Strongest Man, at Giants Live, that was a decision that I made just to show my pride in my roots. I'm a very light-complected individual. I have got blonde hair. A lot of people say I resemble a Viking more than I do a Mexican. And based on outward appearance, I can't deny them that notion sometimes, but that's even more of a reason why I'm so proud of my roots, is because I want to tell a lot of the stories of the appreciation for my culture, the traditions, the people. Like, these are all things that mean so much to me. The food, these are all things I'm so proud of. So when I went to go compete at World's Strongest Man and I carried the Mexican flag for the first time in 2020, I had an outpour of Latinos worldwide reach out to me, just saying how incredibly happy and proud they were to see someone who had the same heritage, the same roots as they did, out there on the stage, just to see that flag being carried among what in a lot of ways could be viewed as a whitewashed roster sometimes. It triggered a lot of pride, and I had people from all over the world just sending me messages of unwavering support, and it was the most profound thing. I never asked for any of it. I never expected any of it, but to receive it, it just made me feel so much larger than myself. And that's a feeling that a collective pride can really trigger, and it's such a good feeling. And I think that's the essence of having Heritage Months in a lot of ways. But to answer Jaime's question, how does it feel to be at the forefront of Latin American strongman representation? It feels really good in a lot of ways. That one of my biggest objectives, I don't know if objective is the right reason or right way to say it, but one of my biggest reasons to also represent my roots is to show others, other Latinos, other Hispanics, that it can be done. I mean, it's easy for me for people to look at me and say this. Well, he's already been there, the world's strongest man. It's so easy for him to say it, but I'm just a normal guy. I grew up here in Edinburgh, Texas. I mean, I was nothing particularly special at athletics in high school, but I was driven. I had a passion for this, and I followed it. And here I find myself in the upper echelons of this pursuit. And I just want the other Latinos, the other Hispanics out there to know that it can be done. You know, it's so strange sometimes, the phenomenon of someone seeing someone else do something and knowing that it can happen makes it even more powerful for the next person to do it. Makes it even easier. It's to know that it's already been done, makes it easier to walk that path. And in something as intimidating as strongman, to have that extra push, that extra nudge, to know that you can do it, that can oftentimes just mean so much to the individual. So I know there's so much strength here in the Rio Grande Valley, and there's so much strength in Latino countries, and there's so much strength in Latinos. I was told at World's Strongest Man that I was the first Mexican Hispanic to ever compete at World's Strongest Man. And that was really cool. But let me tell you what is so much cooler than being the first to compete at World's Strongest Man of Mexican Latinos or Latinos. I think there might have been a Brazilian. But to be the first of Mexican or Hispanic Latinos at World's Strongest Man, that's cool. But to be the first of many is much cooler. And that's what I want. I want to be the first of many. I want to see a wave of Latinos start to make headway in this sport and take it to the top. I know they're out there. And there's so many of them that are already in the pro levels. I mean, I was just talking about Austin Andrade. We also got Jose Baez. I mean, and we look outside America. This 2022 World's Strongest Man, we had Manuel Angulo also out there from Chile. Chile is a Hispanic country. We had 2 Hispanic athletes at World's Strongest Man this year for the first time in history. I mean, that's just incredible. And it's stuff like that that really gives me even more fuel to the fire. So to answer Jaime's question, it feels really damn good. It feels really damn good knowing that I am paving the way for an even bigger representation of Latinos in the sport. I want to see mis hermanas competing in the sport. And I want them to find the same success and enjoyment that I have. And I know it can be done. So it feels really good. And I, at the tail end of Hispanic Heritage Month, I am so appreciative to be able to make decisions and to be able to do things like show pride in my heritage by simply carrying the flag of my ancestors. And I mean, it feels real good. I know there's some people that have problems with it, but it's such a small minority group of people that have problems with it, that are vastly overshadowed by the outpour of support and love from all the Latinos. And I will say that the very few people that do have problems with me carrying the Mexican flag, sometimes they're white and they are not Mexican. They should have no input on this whatsoever. But anyways, I want to move on to training now. I had some questions on training. Let's see. I don't think this was a question that I saw on a comment and that had gotten deleted, but it was a good question. And the question is, how do you train in a deadlift suit when prepping for a contest? Do you train in a deadlift suit every session? Do you do every weight in a deadlift suit? Deadlift suits are still something that I'm relatively new to. And it's kind of weird to hear me say that, knowing that I've used them to pull some of the best lifts so far in my career. But I didn't start using a deadlift suit until 2020. I knew that once I had been invited to World's Strongest Man in 2020, we were allowed deadlift suits, and it just seemed like if some guys are going to have this advantage, it might make sense to just try to see if I can make this advantage work for me as well. So in the short amount of time that I have used deadlift suits, though, the biggest fault that I see is athletes training all the time in deadlift suits. You have to remember that this deadlift suit, in a lot of ways, is like an exoskeleton. I mean, it wraps around the body, and it gives you extra compression so that when you are bent over in that position, grabbing that deadlift bar on the ground, it will spring you up and give you a little bit of extra juice off and a little speed off the ground. But if you're wearing something over the body, an exoskeleton, you have to understand that the fundamental principle of that is that the body, the core of it, is what does the work. The exoskeleton just supports, and it would be nothing without the body itself. So when you have athletes that are training in a deadlift suit every single session, day in, day out, they're missing out on so much of that strengthening that occurs from doing the raw lifts without the suit. And when I was just getting into using a deadlift suit, there was that learning curve with the suit where you can't just put on the suit and instantly be better. You have to really work and practice and getting good at it, knowing where it pulls, when it doesn't, where to engage your hips, when it doesn't, how to strap it on, how to get in and out of it, how to breathe. It's not, you don't just put it on and get better. So there was that learning curve of I need to practice in the suit more and more and more. So I was doing it so frequently to get ready for these big shows that I was missing out on the raw deadlifts, and I started to really see the numbers take a hit. And that gave me some really good insight to where now when I'm prepping for shows, I will try to stick to, on my deadlift sessions, one deadlift session, if I'm prepping for a suited show, will be with a suit. The next deadlift session will be without a suit. And I'll just keep following that so that I can know that I'm always doing my due diligence in training my raw strength without the assistance of the suit, but I'm also still gaining that practice with the suit to know where it's going to pull, when it's going to pull, how it's going to fit my ever-changing body. It fits. If I change and fluctuate 10 pounds, which happens frequently, that can make my suit fit so much different in so many ways. So to be very in tune with the tools that you use, there's a lot of weight to that. So I recommend when you do train in a deadlift suit, make sure that you're training no more frequently than every other session with it. Get those raw deadlifts in. As for every weight, when I'm warming up to, when I was prepping for the World Deadlift Championships, let's say when I'm warming up to a max level weight, to a single, a 1 rep sort of thing, I would train and I would warm up without the suit until I got to about my 70% range. That means from any weight, 700 pounds or less, that would be without the suit on. And again, that is for the purpose of just really warming up those muscles under the power drive that they need to execute the lift and get the job done. So you don't want to have the suit on for that. I mean, you need your muscles to be able to give their full power without having to rely or lean on any sort of assistance at all. But then once I got to that 70% range, I've warmed myself up enough to where it's like, all right, now let's put the suit on, see how it's pulling on these lighter weights, so that by the time we get to the 90, 95, 100%, we know exactly how this thing is moving and we're locked in. But that's the structure that has worked for me. So warm up to 70%, and then at 70%, get the suit on for your last 2 to 3 warm-up sets before hitting that max effort lift that you're going to. How do you prepare yourself food and recovery wise in the 2 to 3 days before attempting a max? And this is a question asked by @KingB66. Food and recovery wise, if I have a deadlift max attempt coming up in the week, that is the holy grail of my week. And every decision that I'm making for that prep is going to be something that I do as early as 1 week out. So that is, I'm structuring my training in a way to where I'm not doing anything that's going to take away from my top end. I'm not training stones or heavy log cleans a couple days before to where picking that weight up off the ground repeatedly is going to get me sore for when or fatigued or needing to recover for when it's time to do my deadlift. When it's time to do my deadlift, I want to know that I'm recovered and that I have no factors that are taking little bits away from my top end. I want it to be full steam ahead. So if I plan like a deload type of week in the days prior, maybe that's the way that I need to based off of whatever training stimulus I've had up to that point. Or if I just take a couple, like 1 or 2 recovery days before that max effort lift, that's what I'll do. But I make sure I'm getting my sleep. If I'm not getting my 8 hours of sleep a night, I am damn sure making sure I get a nap, because if you're tired, that's so overlooked, especially in this day and age. I mean, we have so much that we try to do throughout the days that you don't know really like when you're tired and when you're not. So I make sure I get my 8 hours, whether it's naps or not. And then food wise, I'm giving myself all my vitamins throughout the days. I'm taking my joint support. I'm making sure I'm hitting my full daily dose of omegas. I mean, I am leaving no chinks in the armor, and I am just carbing up. The carbs especially happen on the day before and the day of. It's not like I'm carbing up every single day of. I am eating carbs every day of the week because I'm a super heavyweight athlete. But the carb loading, for the sake of really priming that deadlift, happens within 24 hours of that deadlift attempt. Remember that carbs are stored in your muscles as glycogen, and that is the fuel source. that supports the strength of muscular contractions. So I just really try to load the body, and I create a very nourishing and anabolic and strong environment so that when it is time for max, it's full steam ahead. But if you have a max coming up and your training days leading into that max are real heavy and taxing on the nervous system, you're setting yourself up for failure. And I see it sometimes in some athletes that I've worked with. They don't give enough weight to the recovery prior to these big lifts. And anytime you're going for a max, you need to remember a 1 rep max, a PR, an attempt at that is going into uncharted territory. You're attempting something that you've never done before. Maybe you've attempted it before, but completing it is something that your body has never done before. So if your body has never done it, you don't know how your body's going to fare. You don't know that your body has had enough time to adapt to it. So with that level of uncharted territory, there has to be this understanding of like, I need to make this as flawless as possible, and I need to leave no room for error. You need to think of like the NASA rocket flying off. They're not going to push launch until they've covered every single box and made sure that this rocket is not going to blow up on the way up. And you need to feel the same way about deadlift maxes or any other max for that example. You need to know that you have made conscientious efforts in your recovery, in your nutrition, in your training habits, in your mental game, to where when it comes time to push into that uncharted territory, you don't get met with failure or consequence. You just get met with something you knew you could do and you did it flawlessly. So good questions on training there. This is something that I wanted to really tie into myself, is the cost of this sport. And I'm not talking on direct financial cost, although this is an expensive sport in a lot of ways, and I will get into that. But there's so many costs to following this path as a strongman, as a strength athlete, that get often overlooked. And a lot of people don't know about it. The only way to know about it is to walk this path and be confronted with these things for yourself. But I do want to talk about them because there might be some of you athletes out there who are aspiring athletes, and you might be starting to face some of these challenges now, or you're going to be facing them soon, or you faced them in the past and they've broken you down, and maybe you just need to have a new light to look at them through. But the sport is so taxing on us. It's not just taxing on us, but it's taxing on our loved ones and our family and our support systems. The nature of what we do in this sport is breaking ourselves down to rebuild stronger. And I'm talking about the physiological nature of it. When we train, when we do that curl, we're causing microscopic tears in our muscle. And those tears, our body is thinking of this task that we did, this work that we did. Like, okay, we did this and it was tough and it caused these little tears. We're going to fill in these new tears with new muscle to make it stronger than before, so that when we do this task again next time, we're even better at it. And that's what the body does over and over again, the process of breaking down and rebuilding. But when you are constantly breaking down to build back up, there very really can be this moment where you are faced with so much breakdown that you have worn yourself down physically, mentally, when you're in a state of just, I'm so dead. Like, I've just killed myself in the gym and I need to sleep. I feel like I could sleep for days. I'm lethargic. I don't have energy. I mean, that's quality of life stuff here. And that really changes the lens in which you view the rest of the world. And that's caused because, we've broken ourselves down to a point so much. This physical and mental toll that is now at play can change every interaction that you have throughout life and how you approach it. You might be lazy in pursuit because you're just so tired. You might not be willing to carry your weight in a relationship, and that can be a very real dampener or stressor on relationships, just because you're so broken down. So this is one of those things where you have to manage your machine, your body. You have to manage your life, because we're training this machine to get better by breaking it down. If you allow it to break down so much, you either need to know well before it gets to that point of supreme total breakdown, to where you hit that rock bottom and it's like things get shut down and you start getting in trouble. You need to know beyond that. Or if you do get to that point, you need to know strategies to where you can pull yourself out of that very quickly. And that's something that a lot of people don't really know how to do or haven't had to do yet. But it's essential, because if you don't, your life is going to burn out in one way or another, whether it's your pursuit in this sport and getting stronger, whether it's a relationship that can't handle the stress, whether it's responsibilities in work or life that are just not getting the attention that they need and wind up festering and becoming an even bigger stress, whatever it is. There have to be strategies for coping. And a lot of times, if we're talking about the physical breakdown, sometimes that's as easy as dialing in nutrition, drinking more water, and the most often overlooked one, which I just talked about, is getting more sleep. If you can check those 3 boxes, you have done more for your body physically and anatomically and physiologically, to where you stand a really damn good chance at facing all of the other more abstract concepts that follow. But that's just physical stuff. There are a lot of mental strains that come with this too. I mean, because the body goes where the mind takes it, right? The mind and the body are so interconnected that when one of them is failing, it will cause the other to fail. And if the body is hurt, if the body is broken, well, then guess what? The mind is going to weigh heavy, and it's going to be hard for you to look at things in a positive light. There's going to be a lot of mental lows. There's going to be a lot of rock bottoms. I know at World's Strongest Man this year, for example, I had such high expectations of myself, and I really knew what I was capable of and what I was capable of doing. But that was only contingent on my ability to be able to train as effectively as I needed to. And a lot of the stressors at AlphaFit prevented me from being able to train the way that I needed to. And I wound up going into the contest feeling like I did not do nearly as much as I needed to in terms of prep for it. And that sucked in a lot of ways. And it took me to some really dark places, dark places to where I didn't feel like I felt insignificant in a lot of ways. I felt like I squandered an opportunity in a lot of ways. And there were some times where I wanted to hurt myself just because I was just so disappointed. Like I couldn't deal with the disappointment and the failure that I was feeling in my own self. So these mental lows start to surface, and there have to be some strategies for coping with that. The biggest thing is to have a support system that you can talk to, whether it's your partner, a sibling, a therapist, someone that you can talk to where you can kind of take all the things that are in your head and lay them out. Whether it's laying them out to someone else in these abstract forms or talking about them and writing them, just to be able to see them, to have another mind to share the load with, so it's not all just on your mind. That is invaluable, and you get fresh perspective. You're viewing the world through your own lens. When you get another lens from a different perspective, kind of sharing some insight, that's a really cool thing, and it can oftentimes bring into light some things that are hidden. And there might even be some strategies to where you can remove yourself from everything that does cause this stress. So like one of the things that I can see as being very conducive to a lot of stressful training habits is take a training approach that allows you to train really hard on one day and then rest the next day. Kind of like this 1 day on, 1 day off. That way you don't have the pressure to hit these back-to-back sessions and possibly fail at one and feel like you came up short and then trigger this downward spiral of constant negative feedback loops. But instead, you've got that 1 day where you're training, then you have that 1 day you can count on for rest. You get that rest, you feel revitalized, you're nourished, and you're ready to hit it again. I think that's one way for coping with the physical strain of it. But and again, that's removing yourself from trying to get back into it the next day right away and really allowing your recovery to take place. There's other things that you can do to kind of just remove yourself from the stressors, and that's meditation, going to a dark place, tuning out a lot of your senses. I've always wanted to get a sensory deprivation tank. I will get one at some point in the future. I talked to Kevin Ferris about it on the episode of Titan Talk I did with him a couple months back. But having strategies like that in place to where you can really employ them and take the most out of them, I think that's effective. For me, one of the strategies that I had was taking to the skies. It was a way for me to put everything here on the ground on pause and just go out and fly my drones for a bit, get a perspective from up above, go chasing birds or look at clouds from a different perspective, see the ground from 400 feet up, whatever it is. It was kind of a way to disconnect and just feel free and let loose. So it was therapeutic in a lot of ways, but you have to be careful with certain strategies that disconnect you, because you don't want to let them become an escape. Escaping your stressors doesn't make them go away. Oftentimes it allows them that absence of your focus, which triggers them to grow and make them even worse. And at some point they will catch back up with you. So I encourage you, anyone out there who are trying to find strategies to cope with stress, if you're finding ways to kind of disconnect yourself, be wary of not letting those become more than what you want them to be in terms of an escape. You know, an escape to a degree is good, but an escape to where you keep using it to avoid your responsibilities here in reality, that's no good either. But the recovery aspect I want to go back to, because that's essential for avoiding one of the things that can throw you down into a deeper downward spiral, and that's injuries. There is nothing worse than feeling so physically, mentally able, just feeling able and capable in every meaning of the word, and then you get confronted by an injury that just shuts it all down. I felt it, going into Giants Live Cardiff. That's why I had to pull out. I felt it at the Shaw Classic. My buddy Evan Singleton is feeling it right now with his bicep injury. I mean, to have the allure and the excitement of all the potential achievement ahead of you that you can take, and have it just pulled away from you in an instant by an injury and your body breaking to where you are no longer able to execute your power, that sucks. And some people are mentally equipped to where they can take that and they can be okay and start thinking about what comes next. But some people are not mentally equipped with that. And that can send them into a very deep downward spiral of just depression and feeling sorry for oneself and just not knowing how to take that next step forward to climb back up. And I really think that that's a tragic flaw in so many ways, but it's understandable. I would just urge people suffering from that to know the truth, in that what has happened once an injury has happened, it's already happened. It's behind you. We don't have control of the past. It's behind us, but we do have control of what happens from every moment then on. So you have an injury. It sucks. It sucks. It really does. But don't dwell on it anymore, because negative stress does not make you feel better. It makes you feel worse. Instead, understand and accept the injury is there. Develop strategies to where you can map out your recovery, to where you can possibly even give room to ways that your recovery will move faster than projected. Just think of how you can make your recovery as effective and concise as possible. All the things that you can do, all the homework and the efforts that you can do behind the scenes to make that recovery rate increase. The joint supports, the peptides, whatever you can do. Think about those things. Think about the future and how to map it. Don't dwell on feeling shitty and sorry for yourself. That's nothing. And I think that's a very easy hole to fall into if you're not careful. So allow yourself proper recovery time. Be very vigilant of any signs that your body's giving you in the first place. But if you do get confronted with injury, which walking this path, you will at some point, that's just the reality, understand that it's behind you and don't dwell on it. Don't cry over spilled milk. Instead, think of how you can make the future as bright as possible from that point on. What are some unique expenses strongmen have? Asked by @SamielBeast. There are quite a lot of unique expenses in strongman. One is this sport doesn't pay in some instances, it doesn't pay nearly as much as you have to put into it. As a super heavyweight athlete, my grocery bill every week is huge. And it's not like my grocery bill just started when I became pro. Like, I was building the foundation for my body. I've been doing that for the past decade. So it's been a decade worth of big ass grocery bills. So there's that. When you compete, you have competition fees you have to pay to enter. You have to travel to contests, whether it's by car or by plane. You have to, if you don't have a supplement sponsor, you have to buy supplements, because let's face it, there are gaps in nutrition that food can't fill unless you're just eating this crazy high voluminous diet with everything that the world has to offer, I mean, supplements have their role to play. And if you're not using them, you're at a disadvantage. There's any potential medical bills. And if you're in this sport for any amount of longevity, one of the most important things for yourself is to have a doctor behind you, someone that you get your routine blood work done. You are able to go to them when you have injuries, whether it's like your general physician to check your blood work and review it, or whether it's a physical therapist or a chiropractor. There's a lot of medical costs involved too with maintaining the body as it walks this path. And whether it's medical costs at the doctor or medical monthly costs for your insurance. I mean, these are some expenses that are there. And then there's the equipment. This is all specialty equipment. So either you're lucky and you can find a gym that has everything that you need, which is a gym membership, or you have to start buying this stuff on your own. And these pieces of equipment, I mean, can easily run in the upper hundreds to the $1,000 mark. And on top of that, you have support gear that you have to buy. You have to have gear that supports your body. And I mean, you're allowed to wear it. If some athletes wear it and some don't, the ones that don't wear it are oftentimes at a disadvantage just because of that. On top of that, there's shoes. I mean, there's so much that goes into this sport. And yeah, I'm really excited that competitions are starting to have cash payouts now. I'm really excited that the high level shows are starting to up their prize purses, but this is still a sport where you compare it to the other pro sports out there. The amount that we can make off of the sport in terms of winnings pales in comparison to other sports and the total dollar cost that we wind up putting in to this sport. So that comes down to the question, like, what is the payout and is it worth it? And these are things that you have to weigh on when you're going into a contest or when you're just walking this path, period. I know the hell that I'm going to put my body through. Is it worth it for me to keep walking this path with that cost in mind? For me, it still is. I mean, my goals and achieving them, no matter I won't say no matter the cost, because I refuse to leave this earth early because I followed this path. But I will continue to walk this path and pay these unique expenses when and where I have to, because my goals mean that much to me. But when someone starts losing track of the importance of their goals, maybe it's not worth it to them anymore. But then it also comes down to, what am I worth and what is my time worth? It's a very useful thought experiment to have. I advocate it to a lot of my athletes, and I try to think of it myself too, is try to think what the dollar amount is of every single minute of your day. And I'm not asking you to come out with this direct figure, but have an idea and starting to understand and try to rationalize, like, if I did have to divide the 24 hours I have in each day into how valuable is that $1, you can even think of how much you get paid at work and use that as a reference point or whatever, but think about it. And then you at least have an idea of, is my time worth X pursuit or Y pursuit? And plus, when you go into the workforce or going to a new job, you're equipped with this thought experiment like, well, I have a good idea of what my value is worth, so I can take that with me. And I mean, there's some good value there, but know your worth, because there's, like I've been talking about for the past few minutes, there's so many costs. And if you don't have anything to offset those costs, it's very hard to keep walking this path. But find the good, find the good in understanding why you are following these pursuits and these ambitions. Hold on to what's important in your life. Hold on to the most important things in your life, because you will always use the light of these important things as a contrast to the negatives. Know fully what your whys are and why you follow this path. Don't ever lose track of your goals, whether it's keeping a whiteboard in your room that you see every day with the things you want to achieve, or a picture of an idol or a role model on the wall, or, whatever it be. Know fully why you are doing what you do. Know fully why you started down this path in the first place. And don't lose track of that, because it was enough of a force to get you going. It should be enough of a force to keep you going if it means that much to you still. You have all these things in mind, What's the cost? What's the payout? What am I worth? What are my whys? What's important? And now you're able to frame the vision. And when you have a framed vision, no matter how big that mountain of stress is above you, no matter how big the cost, no matter how much the weight it is putting on you, on your support system, on your friends, on your family, on your partners, on your offspring, if you know all these things and you know the worth and you know down to the core of your being that it is worth it and it is still something you want to pursue, you have that vision framed and it's easy to keep walking the path. But coming up with that surmised point of view to see it, that's the hard part. That's the hard part. But I encourage you all to follow that thought process and those experiments to see where it takes you. Touching on career perspectives, this is a question asked by Sniper, the majestic fucking Raven, Juan Cantu, one of my athletes who I've trained with for the past few years. What's the moment you are most proud of in your strongman career? Honestly, my most recent performance at the Shaw Classic, I'm just so over the top about that because I got to go head to head with Alexei Novikov for the world record. I got to feel what the world record felt like. I didn't quite get it, but that was such an electrifying experience, and I pushed to the full extent of my abilities. And then the stone run at the very end. I mean, I was one of only 4 or 5 athletes to finish that full stone run. Arguably the best stone run I've ever had. It was great. I mean, I'm so proud of it. And to measure up against that roster of the world's best, it makes me feel very proud. And it's more affirmation to knowing that I am right where I want to be, right where I need to be. So it's a reflection of where I am right now, my most recent contest. And I feel really good about that. And it's also an inclining as to know where I will be in the coming future. I've overcome injury at this point, and I'm pushing the bounds of myself and of human potential. You know, I'm doing things that such a small, minute portion of the world's population ever get the dream of, and I'm so damn proud of it. If you weren't in the sport of strongman, where would you be now? This is another question I had come in, and I don't have the person who asked it. I apologize. In 2018, I learned that my soul belongs in the mountains. I married my wife, Bianca, in Rocky Mountain National Park, and it was the first time I had ever been to the real mountains, and I just fell in love. I felt, I mean, I'm marrying my soulmate there, and then in this amazing environment, our hearts found each other and this sense of belonging in that mountainous landscape. So sooner or later, I would have found that truth regardless of strongman. I would have found out that I would belong in the mountains. So after strongman, I know I'm going to return to the mountains. If I wasn't in strongman, I would probably be, I imagine, a biologist studying forest or mountain ecosystems. Or something I have given a lot of thought to in the past is joining search and rescue. You know, becoming a search and rescue operative and helping people when they're in dire need of help there in the mountains. So, what are your post strongman goals? Log of V Strong. Well, my post strongman goals, whenever that day comes, my biggest goal is to leave strongman on my terms, you know, to hang up the towel, so to speak. I don't want to have that taken from me by any, you know, life-threatening injury or something. I don't want to have the time when I exit the sport be determined by anyone other than myself or any force other than myself. So I could have plenty of other goals, but that's my immediate post-strongman goal, is knowing that I'm the one that triggered that exit. As for other post-strongman goals, I want to just start knocking out peaks, different 14ers in Colorado. Like, I want to see mountains all over the world, and that's going to require being a little bit lighter body frame. So I'll probably drop down to 250, maybe even 230, and just be a lot more nimble and less heavy breathing from that point on. But I want to go into a lightning round real quick. We're coming to the end of this solo episode. So a lot of these questions were asked, and they're funny questions, some of them, and good questions. So I'm just going to answer them very quickly. At Reed Merritt asks, cilantro, delicious or gross? Cilantro is delicious. I think it adds some really good flavor to salsas and tacos and anything else that you put it in. But I do know that there's people out there who don't like it. But the Texas Titan does like his cilantro. After strongman, would you consider drone racing at Tentacle Boss? Yes, absolutely. I've put in a lot of time on a flight simulator. I really enjoy going through race courses and it kind of hitting that flow state. But it's something that I would definitely consider doing. I have a high-powered drone that is capable of drone racing right now, but I would like to get another race-specific drone at some point in the future. So, yes, I would love to join drone racing. And if there's any potential drone racing sponsors or companies that want to work with a pro strongman out there, hit me up. I'm your guy. Which sports company could come on board and help grow the sport? Adidas, Nike, Noble, Reebok, etc. Asked D. Leahy at 89. I can't think of any one in particular, but I will say that, Rogue has done so much for this sport and growing it and branching out beyond CrossFit. I think that any of these other companies, if they start seeing that a strongman isn't quite as niche of a sport as it is, and they start seeing that it could be for more people, they could have a strongman facet of their business. And there's a lot of ways that strongman can be for everyone. And with the sport, it is essential for that to happen, for the sport to keep growing. So those of you who are in the sport, don't be assholes out there. Be inviting and encouraging to new people who are trying to find this sport. Whether or not they compete, there are so many strengths and things that can be taken away from this sport that are just precious. So grow the sport, because you continue to grow the sport, big dollars will come into it, and that will just make it better for everyone all around. How do you manage business, fatherhood, and training? How does scheduling go? At Nathaniel Rodriguez. Well, Nathan, it's tough to say the least, especially with my daughter being 7 months old now. I live my life in about 2-hour increments at a time. Whenever she's awake, myself and my wife, we want to be there with her, active and watching her, especially now that she's trying to learn how to walk. So it's kind of like you put everything else on pause, or at least one of us. And my wife is in school right now too, so there's a lot of times where when my baby's awake, I'm right with her. And so as terms of how scheduling goes, me and my wife have to be very communicative with each other in terms of, if she wants to train, if I want to train, if one of us has to leave, the other one has to be there with my daughter. So a lot of times if I do need to get anything major done, my daughter is a great sleeper and she sleeps through the night, and she doesn't usually wake up until anywhere between 9 and 10. I will try to hit that early morning grind. And training is still very tough for me to do in the morning. I just don't feel like my best self then. But if there's work or anything that I can do early on, that's my time of day to do it. So I'm still adjusting, Nathan, and I'm sure if you ask me another 6 months from now, I will have a different answer for you. Have you noticed any recovery impairments since newborn-induced sleep deprivation? At Jake Rumble 1276. Jake, I haven't, other than the frustration of not being able to just plug away at stuff without having to, put it on pause while baby Zio's awake. But she sleeps, like I said, she sleeps through the night, so I'm not really missing out on sleep. If I'm missing out on sleep, it's just because I'm going to sleep too damn late. So I actually feel pretty lucky in that regard. Have you tried telling any dad jokes to people? At Seabass1 of 1. I have. I pride myself in saying a lot of dad jokes. I think I have a true calling for it, but I think my most recent dad joke, I was talking to Brian and Carrie Shaw the other day, and I was telling them that I have a ton of work to do this week, or several tons, jokingly saying that about having to move all of my gym equipment. So pretty lame, I know, but that's I like telling dad jokes. I wish I had a better one for you right off the top of my head. All right, I got 2 more lightning round questions, and these have to do with space. So these are going to start taking us into our final section, space out. Do you think UFOs we see are aliens or interdimensional travelers? At BST Strength. I think there are a lot of unexplained phenomena, especially occurring with our atmosphere, whether it be, solar flares, cosmic radiation, whatever it be. The government might be testing things too. So I think most UFOs tend to be things that, are not actually aliens, but I would not be surprised if we did have aliens or interdimensional travelers start popping up before, every now and then here to kind of scope us out. But I also would not be surprised if they turned around immediately and be like, all right, these creatures are so far from what we thought they would be at right now, they're going to wind up killing themselves, and they just wind up flying off in the other direction. But I haven't seen any UFOs myself other than the Marfa lights in Marfa, Texas. And I don't know if you can truly classify those as UFOs, but they are unexplained, unidentified flying objects, that's for sure. Look into them if you haven't heard of them before. But aliens or interdimensional travelers, I think those could be synonymous in some ways. But, well, I don't know. I haven't met one yet, but I would be curious to have that conversation with one. I would not be the person who's quick on the trigger to try to extinguish them. What do you think will happen first? Land on Mars or have perfect autonomous cars? Asked by Tim the Ginger Cox. Perfect autonomous cars. I think perfection is a really hard thing to achieve, Tim. So just because of perfection being so hard to achieve, I think we'll land on Mars first. But we put a direct time frame into that. We'll have boots on the ground on Mars at the latest by mid 2030s. Okay, so do I think that in a decade cars can achieve total perfection? A decade is a lot of time, especially considering to where autonomous driving was 10 years ago to where it is now. Maybe we do have perfect autonomous cars, but just based off of how quickly technology advances and how long it can drag sometimes, maybe that beats out how long it takes to get to Mars. But we're on the precipice of both. I mean, and some of it's happening from the same company. SpaceX is going to take us to Mars, and Tesla is really fine-tuning his autonomous driving. So that's some really exciting stuff. And finally on the show, we are coming to my favorite section, Space Out. Before we do, I want to take a quick intermission. All right, you ready to space out with me? Let's do it. So there's a lot of really cool stuff happening right now with space, which I guess I could say that technically about anything. So, I mean, the James Webb Space Telescope is pumping out some really great images. I know we recently got to see Neptune and all of its rings and just that brilliant infrared spectrum to where you can see its moons. And I really love getting to see the new looks at Jupiter as well and its auroras, and it's really encourage you to take a look at some of those the James Webb Space Telescope's images that are coming out. That's really awesome. But what I want to talk about today is the Artemis 1 mission and the Orion spacecraft plus the SLS Space Launch System vehicle. We are finally at the verge of getting back to the moon, and it's quite exciting because we haven't been back to the moon in 50 years. And so 1972 was the last time we actually had a human on the moon. It seems absurd. The moon is right there. It's not like another planet or anything. So to know that it's been 50 years since we were last there, it's almost like, why has there been this huge lapse in time where we just stopped going to the moon? And I guess the real answer is there's been more pressing things here on Earth that we've been focusing as a society and species to kind of tackle. But that's the reality, guys. I mean, we have not been back to the moon in 50 years. But here we are on the precipice of going back. NASA has a very articulate plan laid out for the Artemis missions, Artemis 1, 2, 3, and 4 over the next couple years. With Artemis 1, the first stage of this plan to establish a lasting presence on the moon has been set to happen. And about 3 weeks ago was when Artemis 1 was set to launch from Florida. I guess it's the Kennedy Space Complex there in Florida. I can't, the exact name is failing me right now, but launching there in Florida, that's where the Orion spacecraft is mounted on top of the SLS vehicle, the largest rocket humanity has made yet. And that's not including Starship, SpaceX's Starship on top of Super Heavy. That is technically the biggest rocket, but it has not proven that it can make it all the way up to orbital launch yet, but I will get on that in a bit. But the most powerful spacecraft that we have ever made, the SLS, the Space Launch System, and this will take the Orion spacecraft, the top part of that center capsule, all the way over to the moon, where it will orbit for a few times in an extended trajectory, gather data, test out all the systems, so that the next mission, Artemis 2, will involve carrying a human payload, and astronauts will finally go back to the moon. And that's not set to happen until well into next year. But we got to get Artemis 1 first. We got to test out the vehicle. We got to test out all the equipment. We got to get to the moon, collect the diagnostics. That's first to happen. But Artemis 1 has been off to quite a rocky start. 3 weeks ago, when it was originally set to launch, everyone was getting so fired up about it. NASA had its live streams. Different YouTubers and news outlets were out there, right in Florida, ready to watch this thing, and it was a fail. They started pumping fuel into the rocket, and there was a hydrogen leak, and the hydrogen leak prevented the rocket from being launched on its first launch date. The leak was not able to be fixed for its second launch date, so it's got scrubbed again, and they took it all the way back to the hangar to really get down and try to fix this thing. And it's just been quite a process. But these scrubbed launches all really kind of make it suck that we can't quite get off the ground. And it has to do with hydrogen. That is the propellant that they're using as rocket fuel for this SLS vehicle. Now, hydrogen, if you remember back to your high school chemistry or even your middle school chemistry, hydrogen is the smallest element. It's that top left corner of the periodic table. It's element number 1. It's got 1 proton. It's got 1 proton, 1 electron. It's physically in size the smallest molecular substance, or at a molecular level, it's the smallest element. So when you're talking about hydrogen gas, comprised of the smallest molecular element, leaks are a very easy thing to happen, because even the smallest amount can get through the smallest hole. And that's the problem that was facing the SLS launch vehicle with I think it's 750,000 gallons of fuel, I believe, is that they have to pump into it. I might be mistaken there, but it's an absurd amount of hydrogen fuel. And this fuel was escaping through a leak, and it was such a small leak that it was really hard to narrow down, but it was preventing the rocket from taking off. We would hate to have that rocket go up and then just burst into flames like the Challenger's rocket back in the day because of a hydrogen leak. So it's a big problem. It's a big problem from a very, very small material. And hydrogen is so effective. It's a very, very small and explosive atom. Hydrogen is at a molecular compound, I believe it's found as H2, so 2 hydrogen molecules together. Anyways, it's also a very old fuel. This is the same fuel propellant that was used during the shuttle program and a lot of the early Saturn launches and the Apollo launches. So here we are, 50 years since we were last on the moon. We've got this spacecraft, this massive rocket that has been used from recycled parts from the shuttle program, but has been upgraded with modern advances in science and technology. And this was a thing that Congress kind of set on to offset some of the costs, right? Is let's use some of the leftover materials from the very expensive shuttle program and see if we can integrate them into this new next generation vehicle, which they did. And they've upgraded the rocket systems. They've upgraded the engines. So many upgrades, but at the core, it is still powered by hydrogen, a very small molecule. And that is troublesome because it has now prevented this rocket from going off on its mission to the moon, and it's been delayed several times. And now it was set to go on the 27th of September, so like right now it was set for another launch, but with the hydrogen leaks now apparently addressed, it can't launch because we're at a part of the season where we're having to deal with Hurricane Ian is now going to hit Florida. And then there's another tropical depression that hasn't even been named yet that is possibly going to head to Florida too. So you can't have a massive rocket sitting on the platform when there's a hurricane coming in. That's just, is asking for destruction. And let's talk about the cost of this thing too. This project, it has reused and upgraded parts from the old shuttle program, but it is still not a reusable rocket, and it is a very expensive cost. This entire project has already costed upwards of $23 billion, the Artemis project. And per launch, it's going to be about, so $23 billion for the project. Per launch, it's going to be about $2 to $4 billion. And we're already getting close to that $4 billion mark because of all the pushbacks and scrubs we've already had to face. So this is a very expensive vehicle. And you don't want to have a $4 billion launch vehicle off of a $23 billion project go up in flames before it even leaves the atmosphere, let alone you don't want to have it knocked over by a hurricane. But the high cost of this is what makes it so hard to commit to the space program. And it all comes down to something that Elon Musk saw very early on, and that's the reusability factor. If you cannot reuse your vehicle, you're paying for a new vehicle every single time. And we're talking about the biggest rockets, the most advanced rockets that humanity has ever built. If you just waste that and you explode it and you're done with it every single time, a single use, that's a huge waste. So $2 to $4 billion per launch of this SLS launch vehicle versus what Musk claims Starship can achieve in the near future at $2 million per launch because the rocket and the vehicle is reusable. I mean, remember, it takes 1,000 millions to equal 1 billion. So if you're talking about a $4 billion launch, that's 4,000 millions versus a $2 million price tag for a single Starship launch. And this is where SpaceX can really take the industry by storm if it can achieve that level of cost, because it doesn't cost as much to send. The price per pound of payload dramatically goes down, and building colonies, sending private people, if I wanted to go to space, it would cost a lot less, is very exciting. But this Artemis mission has cost so much, and it has been delayed by Congress since 2016. And here we are in 2022, 6 years after it's been consecutively delayed, and 50 years since we were last on the moon, and the damn rocket cannot go up because it's had hydrogen leaks, and now because it's facing a hurricane. So it's going to happen, but this is one of those things where the cost has been so high that no chances can be taken. But it's so frustrating because I want to go back to the moon. And why is it important to be on the moon? One, it's the nearest cosmic body to Earth. So if shit hits the fan here, the closest neighbor is the moon. I believe it's roughly 200,000 miles away, if not a little more. Excuse me. So that pales in comparison to the several million miles away Mars is, or any of the other planetary bodies. So we have the nearest cosmic body as a fallback, but the peace and balance necessity to not have a soul power on the moon is also a big deal. And Russia and China, two oppositional forces in terms of government to the U.S. and a lot of the allied countries, they are already well under their plans of getting a lunar presence and establishing lunar colonies. And if they're able to do that before the U.S. can, that really can shift balance. And when we're talking about another planetary or another body outside of the Earth, if it is completely monopolized and run by Russia and China, I mean, let's think about the geopolitical climate right now, especially with the war in Ukraine that Russia started. We wouldn't want to have anything like that even come close to happening on the moon. And so there's the peace and balance necessity, and there's the colony necessity. I mean, you want to be able to establish colonies on the next cosmic body, the neighboring cosmic body, to know that you can do it even further away. So if we ever hope to establish colonies on Mars, which is the plan, we sure as hell better be able to do it on the moon. And that's going to give us the best practice. And not only that, it will provide significant economic value. There are certain substances we can harvest on the moon. There are jobs we can create. There are new outlets in technology, new innovations. I mean, setting up colonies and being able to do it and proliferate the growth, that will trigger a whole new type of growth in the space sector. And, like science, innovation, economy, that all goes up. And last but not least, why do we want to be on the moon? it is a strategic deep space launch point. The gravity on the moon is so small compared to Earth. There's no atmosphere. The amount of energy it takes to lift a vehicle and a payload off of the lunar surface compared to what you have to do here on Earth, it is significant. So if we want to talk about launching to Mars, we don't launch directly from Earth and take that vehicle all the way to Mars from Earth. We either refuel in orbit or we launch from the moon, because it's just going to give us much more payload and much more of what we actually need to get from here to Mars versus wasting all the energy on fuel that you need just to get out of the Earth's atmosphere. So a strategic deep space launch point for Mars and everything else that comes beyond. But we stopped going to the moon 50 years ago. And in a lot of ways, it seems like we picked up right where we left off. I know there have been innovations and upgrades in technology, and we've upgraded this new SLS vehicle from the space shuttle parts, but it's still on hydrogen. Elon Musk knew that this would be a problem very early on, so he constructed the engines for the SpaceX rockets to run off of methane. Methane is CH4. Hydrogen is H2. The molecular hydrogen is much smaller than the molecular methane, and that makes it a lot easier to prevent leaks. Makes it a lot easier to not have to scrub launches due to having to manage this small and microscopic molecular compound. So it seems in a lot of ways that we are in a very archaic way of thinking, because amidst all the technological innovation, the fact that we have not been back there in 50 years and we are still using the same type of fuel to try to get there, it's almost kind of like, yeah, this is so awesome, but it's not going to be able to happen because there's all these things working against it. And that's kind of a tragic way of thinking of it in a lot of ways, and it's kind of setting up for a less than optimistic appeal or feeling towards it. But the undeniable truth is that it is very exciting to know that NASA has this very well articulated, laid out plan of how we will establish a lasting presence on the moon. So I'm very glad to know that the hydrogen leaks have been addressed and fixed, and that the last thing that we're waiting on pending a launch of this SLS vehicle is good weather. So if the hurricanes can kind of take a little break for a little bit to where Florida can catch a breath of air and send this rocket up, then we will have this thing up before the end of the year. But NASA has already said that it is not going to be too jumpy on it. They are not going to risk this multi-billion-dollar project and vehicle unless they can know for sure that it is going to go up there safely and return safely with the exact objectives taken care of. But it looks like there is a future ahead to where we can build off of the shortcomings of what we have now and make it even better. And that brings me back to SpaceX, because if I'm not mistaken, SpaceX finally got FAA clearance for their orbital launch. They're finally going to be able to stack one of their several starships that they have ready to go and constructed. They're going to stack it on top of the Super Heavy booster, and they're going to launch it from here in South Texas at Boca Chica and put it into orbit. And that could happen as early as late October or November, and that's really damn exciting. I'm going to make sure to take my daughter out there, and I want to see this thing. I want to feel this thing as it takes off. It's the next stage, and it tickles me down to my core to know that there might be a future within the next decade to where there are jobs involved in going to space and constructing a lunar colony. So yeah, I can't help but feel like the fact that we haven't been back to the moon in 50 years has put us in a state where the technology that we're using to get there might not be the most ideal, but we are back on track. We're talking about going back to the moon, and there's a plan, there's projects, there's money involved, and that is damn exciting. I really cannot wait for that next chapter to be written, the chapter where we have boots on other planetary bodies, and it's in the very near future. So hopefully Artemis 1 can get up to the moon, and then we can send some people there and next year on Artemis 2, and 3 and 4 go without a flaw, and then we are having a lasting colony on the moon and then on to Mars. It excites me. I really hope for the best. I'm glad that people are starting to talk about it again. People are getting excited. That makes for nothing but growth and, I don't know, the prosperity and all that potential to be gained from the future and exploring beyond Earth. That's the future that I want. That's the future that I want my daughter to have too. And I'm really excited for it happening. But anyways, I wanted to talk about that. I really hope that the rocket gets off the ground. I hope that we are able to keep making the advancements, and I hope that the moon does not become run by Russia and China. So that's that. But ladies and gentlemen, this has been a solo episode of Titan Talk. I'm glad you have joined me here for this one. Season 1 of Titan Talk will be starting to dwindle down. I think I might have anywhere between 2 to 4 episodes left, and then we're going to call it for the season. I've wanted season 1 to kind of be me getting my bearings with the show, figuring out exactly what direction I want to take it. And then for season 2, we'll plan some really special stuff and see how we can make it even better. But be on the lookout for the last remaining episodes of season 1 of Titan Talk, and I definitely have some special things in store for you with the rest of the season. But until the next episode, you guys keep wayfaring out there in this universe of power. Stay curious, keep looking up, stay smart, and don't forget, recovery days and training are very important. Don't beat your body to a pulp to where you have to crawl back out of a bottomless pit of misery and pain. I'm Gabriel Pena. I'm the Texas Titan, and this has been Titan Talk. You all take care.